we could say good afternoon, grasshoppers, as we're about to start our study stream for Shories versus Spielmann. Basically, black to move and win, featuring the ever so popular sacrificial maestro, Rudolf Spielmann. Basically, Spielmann was a classical player. He answered d4 with d5 much of the time, and he created a lot of art. He also answered d4 with d5, and he utilized, as we will see in the next stream, he utilized the terrace defense with a great effect. So basically, in e4, e5 games, you mastered grasping the center and hanging on to the center. And this is where every chess player must firmly achieve their foundations. I remember International Master / Grandmaster-elect Michael Brooks, who was one of my early influences, answered e4 with e5 much of his career and became a grandmaster. He never really experimented with a lot of things. He also played and dabbled with the Sicilian, but in general, he was a d4 player until he became 2200, and then he switched to e4, and then he cut a swath through everyone. So he played very solid, very steady chess, and he knew a lot about everything. The most dangerous threat to the e5 repertoire is still the Ruy Lopez, with the idea of removing the defender. On move number 3, the simple tactic, removing the defender. No, Jonathan Spielmann, who is a good friend, is a candidate for the World Championship in 1981. In the 1980s, he was a candidate for the World Championship. Gamer guy seems a little on the nose. But no, this is Rudolf Spielmann. There is a little bit of a resemblance, but Jonathan Spielmann's name is Speelman. In any event, Spielmann, of course, answers with Morphy's defense. Now, Morphy's defense was around before Paul Morphy, but Paul Morphy introduced the concept of not playing b5, only playing b5 when it was needed. So, for example, if we play b5 too soon, this becomes a little bit something called the wing variation. And these pawns can be undermined with a4 and c3 if the pawns should progress, and then black has incredible weaknesses in his pawn structure on the queen side. So Paul Morphy went with the restraint of counterattacking the center a la Morphy. And after the castles, there are two major branches of theory here. In fact, now I think there are 4 major branches of theory. We've got the Arkhangelsk variation, which is what I tend to prefer now, with bishop to c5. Very, very popular. You have the immediate b5 followed by bishop to c5, which is the Arkhangelsk variation. You have b5 and bishop to b7 with immediate counterplay on e4. You have the deferred Steinitz variation, but all of these closed variations should be treated the same, and Spielmann preferred the open variation. And I dabbled with the open variation briefly. I got my head handed to me a few times. Black's position is extremely loose and requires great skill. But if you are going to challenge white, the open variation, unfortunately, has a number of variations where equality can be achieved. And it's very hard to win with black if white plays very dryly. The best variation to play for a win, the time-honored d4 threatens the e5 pawn, and now is the right moment to counterattack. And the main line has begun. So there are 3 or 4 major moves with white. I'm going to flip the board, and I'm going to actually go for candidates for white. I prefer Smyslov's move from the 1950s, by the way. Give me a moment to get some coffee. Anyone who needs more time, Are there 5? I definitely know there are 4 solid variations against this. So there are only 4 truly good moves approaching this variation, and all of them are a matter of taste. Garry Kasparov played one of the more offbeat variations. In his day. And now, the British Spielmann. I still can't get over that. So, in order of appearance, there is c3, which is played in this particular game, which is designed against knight c5, allowing the bishop to fight for the long diagonal. This is a common theme in the Ruy Lopez. And today, the most popular move is challenging the e4 knight directly with knight on b to d2. Garry Kasparov, in his landmark book, The Test of Time, where he analyzed previously published games as a world champion to see how his opinions and approach to various positions changed from not being a world champion or a rising star as an international master and young grandmaster to after he became world champion. The test of time was to see how many of the variations stood up. And early in that book, he actually plays bishop e3 as he advocates for its prevention of bishop c5 and the variation that goes along these lines. This variation is extremely popular. Basically, or is it after black castles? This variation doesn't look so popular, but oh, it happens here. Yes, it happens here. Then knight takes c2, bishop takes f2, and I was on the white side of this in a very long-winded game, and basically black gets a lot of counterplay. White's main move that they have to know about is knight f1. Black gets a huge pawn center in return for rook on an open file versus 2 minor pieces that are not very active. So in any event, going back to the main line position, the move played by Smyslov and I think experienced its birth around the 1950 candidates tournament. Not Zurich 1953, but I think in 1950, Smyslov played queen e2 with the idea that he would be playing rook to d1, and when black castles, he would fight for the center with c4. This completely undermines the white squared weaknesses, and this position is still good to this day. Quite logical. Queen e2 and rook d1 and c4. The first time I played this variation against the Grandmaster was 1988 in the US Open versus Grandmaster Alex Fishbein. a4 is a move, by the way. a4 is a move, it's just not one of the most popular moves. So in this particular position, a4, if I had to choose a move, would be the 5th most popular move. Let's just check up here. It says it's totally equal. Stockfish, anyway. The problem with a4 is that black can just close down the queen side, and it's a very committal move, Eric. So let's just take a step back for a moment of coaching thought. There are 3 types of moves that you can never take back. I can only think of 2 of them at the moment. But you cannot take back captures. You cannot take back exchanges. Okay, because the piece won't come back onto the board. If you choose to exchange off a bishop, you're not getting the bishop back. And you cannot take back pawn moves. Pawn moves are very committal moves. Once you've made those pawn moves, Yeah, pawn moves, castling you cannot take back so easily. It takes it's an extreme extraction. Yeah, you have to. You could accidentally be misplacing two pieces with castling. No nonsense. It's pointed out. I think castles is the third move. Castling is a hugely committal move, which takes a tremendous effort to undo. Putting your king on the wrong side of the board, very difficult. So you have to think very carefully about any exchange. Those are critical things. Any pawn move, and any decision to put your king on one side of the board or the other. Thank you, no nonsense. Castles is the third one, yes. The most obvious and natural move, castles. Absolutely. So as it turns out in this particular position, so we're going to return to black in this particular position as the mainline move is c3, and this was always thought to be the mainline move. Bishop c5 as advertised. And in this particular moment, white does not choose the standard knight on b to d2, allowing that variation again. I'm just trying to remember what the name of the variation was called, the Dilworth variation. Entire books have been dedicated. Huge amounts of work has been allocated to the Dilworth variation. It's such a beautiful thing, I even wanted to play it. I believe you can even try to play f6 immediately, because the rook isn't going anywhere. So after f6, knight f1, bishop takes f2 as this reaches the same position. And Stockfish has this as slightly better for black. Therefore, today, most people do not play c3 on move number 9. Most people play knight on b to d2. So after c3, bishop c5, knight on b to d2, the Dilworth variation is extremely dangerous. In this particular game, however, after bishop c5, white chooses a move to disturb the balance that Eric Hito has already referenced. Basically, pawn moves, breaking up the pawn structure, and of course we already know what we would like to do in this particular position. I have a descriptive notation book, ironically, so I'm just going to take a little bit of extra care. And as I mentioned before, the ideal answer to this, Spielmann finds b4, keeping lines closed, refusing to weaken those squares. Now white has several choices. This position is relatively even chances for both sides. By the way, equal does not mean draw. This position is not a draw. It is equal chances to win for both sides. So after queen to e2, castles, bishop c2, already the challenge has been thrown down. Now, Spielmann does not play the best move in this position, but we are going to do candidates for black. Got to get going here, everybody. We need candidates for black. Candidate moves for black in this position. How best to answer white's intended bishop takes e4, which may or may not be winning a pawn. But it will be obtained in the bishop pair. Last call. B takes c3, obviously. And B takes c3. And C takes b2. Would answer bishop e4. Now, Spielmann chooses the extra radical move f5. the extra radical f5, interestingly enough. However, for whatever reason, b takes c3 does not appear on the radar because I think white just recaptures with the knight and we lose a lot of time. Yeah, white just recaptures with the knight and black is very, very loose in the center. We have 3 pawn islands. We have the island of the CD island, the isolated A pawn island, and the 3 pawns on the kingside island, whereas white has 2 pawn islands, A, B, and E through H. And so therefore our endgame is looking a little loose, and our pieces are going to have to defend weak pawns, which is unfortunate. So therefore, Spielmann chooses, in this particular position, not the best move. After all, Bruce, our silicone friend, believes that bishop f5 is the right idea, but honestly, any move will do in this position. To be honest, f5, as played by Spielmann, relates to e takes f6, queen takes f6. Tremendous amounts of pressure. We know that Spielmann was all about the art of the attack. So this variation suits him very, very well. And the opponent takes it hook, line, and sinker. So, there's some threats. Yeah, it's okay. By the way, Lichess has improved their coordinates drill to not having a 30-second timer. Under the Learn section, choose coordinates for white or for black, and work on those coordinates for yourself. By the way, you will analyze deeper, better, and more accurately if you work on your coordinates. I don't necessarily know that it will improve anyone by 100 rating points, because your calculation skills could be shite, but they're worth working on. So here we are, candidates for black. Candidates for black in this position. How best to answer all of white's threats and improve our position and coordinate our pieces. Moment of truth. Now already black has 3 very active minor pieces. A queen and a rook on an open file bearing down on f2. So the knight could theoretically be pinned. It is the knight on c6 that is being tagged as a weakness. And only the rook on a8 needs to be brought into the game. So the conditions are ready. Yeah. Watch out for the check on d5. Bishop f5, queen d5 check picks up the bishop on c5. So there's more than one weakness that is. Both of these pieces are unprotected. So therefore, if you already needed more time, you've already paused. But bishop to b3 is the strongest move available in the position. Spielmann, of course, plays for it and immediately starts to prepare an attack on the open e file. He takes care of the weakness or the weakened position of the knight, and at the same time prevents white's rook from reaching a good square, or at least the only other good square other than e1. So after bishop to b3, white in this position doesn't really find the best move. White should also develop with bishop to g5. Instead, white tries to lock in that pawn, that bishop on that file. Rook to d8, knight e7, yes. Going back to Eric Kito's suggestion, knight e7. Right. Exactly. There's no discovery. After rook d8, queen takes c6, bishop d5, because queen takes f6 simplified. So in this particular position, we're going for candidate moves for black. We're going to get as much out of this as we can, everyone. Shories-Spielmann, Scheveningen, 1905, and that is roughly the correct pronunciation of Scheveningen, without getting into any horrid details. Remember, the same threats that were present in the previous position are still here. There's one move that is better than all the others, which seem to lead to white's advantage. So black is walking a little bit of a tightrope in order to achieve this very short win. Believe it or not, this is a very short win. What is wrong with rook on a to d8? How are we saving our position after queen d3? I'm sorry. Rook on a to d8. Sorry. Bishop to g5 could be a little bit of a problem after rook on a to d8. All right, Irina. You're going to have to give me a better Scheveningen pronunciation. How far from Scheveningen is Groningen? My Dutch, I've never studied Dutch. What can I say? I'm less lucky I can pronounce Max Oiva. And it's not the best pronunciation of Max Oiva either. I wouldn't say my pronunciation was horrible. People mispronounce it far worse. 250 kilometers. Wow. So knight to d4, the knight to d4 is the third best move in the position, having let Bruce sit upon it for a little while. But Spielmann finds the rather prosaic, I'm just going to guard everything and make sure that there's no counterplay. In other words, as I mentioned in a previous study, John Nunn in his Secrets of Grandmaster Play mentioned that any counterplay by the opponent is too much counterplay. Any microscopic amount. Therefore, if the opponent is having fun, we're doing something wrong. And every step should be taken to restrict the opponent's opportunities. So white does play knight on b to d2, and we do get rook on a to d8 in. And we don't really want to lose any material with queen d5. We have the x-ray defense of this with after queen takes, pawn takes, and bishop takes, and we're down material as white. So white doesn't have much choice in this position. It is pretty much game over. So any sacrifice that happens after this, white chooses to tuck the queen away to the only theoretically safe square. After all, if queen to g4, then we have opportunities to recover our bishop to this side of the board. We also have possibilities of playing rook to f4. And we can also bother the queen with h5 and many other lines. So, interestingly enough, queen h4, bishop c2 is also an option, so he keeps the bishop restricted. This is his primary goal, to keep the bishop restricted. Yeah, it's like the desert you. So here we are. Candidates for black. Candidates for black. Remember, you're looking for three very, very good moves. And then you need to compare those three good moves for the better move, the best move, and perhaps the god-awful ugly move, which we cannot help ourselves. We are going to consider those moves every now and then. Remember Eric Quito's suggestion of sacking the knight on f6 to try to trap the queen, but then only trading queens. Too bad. But like I said, throw 3 moves out there. Certainly make sure that you look for 3 moves. Sun Chaser, how are you, sir? Great to have you, man. Yeah, b4 is still covered after any exchanges like that, right? Exactly. So here we go. No, we just need to strip. As Irina pointed out, d4 is still covered, so we need to start stripping those pieces away from the defense of the d4 square, and c4 was an atrocious move on the primary basis of that. In this particular position, the number one threat was to the bishop on c3, so almost all of our moves need to be keeping white busy as far as attacks on f2, f3, or on the 2 center squares. So knight e5 should and could be able to work because of the stripped nature of the defenses around the king side. After all, if knight to e5, knight takes b3 would be fatal, because knight takes f3, g takes f3, rook takes f3 is practically checkmate. There's just no way to bring any of the pieces back to this side of the board. Say king to g2, queen to e6. Wow. We're nearly getting mated by a pawn, but it will be a rook in the end. So knight e5 is a pretty good candidate move. Sun Chaser, the knight attacking the bishop. Yeah, you have to be very... Rook e2, by the way, Sun Chaser was a pretty good move. You do keep enough counterplay, but it's probably not exactly enough. This falls in line with Irina Chan's suggestion, where she wanted to get some back rank action. Yes, I did say that correctly. Back rank action. Very popular chess term. No, you were suggesting, what was it? Rook takes f3, knight takes f3, and d4 is covered. But in the seed of that idea, I saw the attack on f2 and the weakness of the first rank. That wasn't you? Oh, that was no nonsense. You're right. It was no nonsense, this idea. No, just have I have Irina on the brain. So knight to d4 was played, which somewhat strips away the defenses. Now white flails about here, attempting to achieve some counterplay, but this falls viciously. The knight takes f3 check, g takes f3, queen to g6, king h1. And now we have one more theoretical decision to make. Candidates for black. How to continue in this position. There are a number of ways to continue. There's a lot of material on offer here. The rook on f1 is hanging. The h file and g file are beckoning. The bishop on c5 is hanging. Yeah, the fact that knight f3 check is key there, yeah. Well, always it's the principle of the highest order of defense. I'm going to run through, see if that command is still here. the 5 most important methods of defense, and you have to really master the 2 that are not dealing with check. For example, you can block a check, you can capture the piece that's checking you, and you can run away from a threat. But grandmasters make certain that all of their stuff is protected inherently against any future attacks. Masters and grandmasters have an inherent understanding of whether or not a piece is or will be threatened and take steps against it. And they also do not flinch from attack. So in other words, when something is attacked, they had appropriately planned for a suitable counterattack. A good offense is better, yes. Sun Chaser has knocked it with rook takes f3. And of course the knight on c5 is a passive, I'm sorry, the bishop on c5 is a passive sacrifice. If knight takes c5, I would say we could look for black's turn to move in that position. That is a much deeper bit of analysis. Does he even cover it here? He really does not cover it. Oh, he covers it a different way. If knight takes bishop x. Wow. He gives the line, if knight takes bishop. Then bishop to c2. Which is certainly very, very convincing. Once that queen is sentenced, then we can actually start threatening checkmate in a variety of ways. Bruce, however, also believed in the discovered attack possibilities of queen to c6, which also seem extremely difficult to meet. We have to get off the file and it's just a free piece. But it's not the same at all, not the same as Spielmann's suggestion, which is the strongest move. If the knight were to take and we were going to shut down the queen, and it will be made without any of those pieces. We have 3 attackers, enough to sacrifice 1 and checkmate with the remaining move. So here we are. After rook takes f3, white chose to move rook to e1. And with the move rook to e1, we now have another choice. I think I saw Irina not play a move based on this tactic in her 3-minute game yesterday. So we'll give several choices for black here. Even though I don't think you need several choices for black in this position, we're going to discuss it anyway.
You got a brother dreaming. Dang baby, I'm a beaming. I'm trying to holler at you, I'm screaming. Let me love you down this evening. Love you, yeah, you know you're my team.
Rook takes f2 indeed. So here we're taking advantage of the pin. There's a lot of stuff going on. We could actually play for attacks on this diagonal. We could capture the pawn, which is the obvious move. However, rook takes f2 takes advantage of the fact that the knight cannot do its job on the back rank. The rook takes f2. And taking advantage of a pin, I know Irina had it in her game. She literally did not take advantage of a pin. In a earlier tournament this week, someone captured the pinned piece rather than continuing to take advantage of its powerlessness. Don't exchange off your opponent's material when it is ineffective. Your bishop or whatever piece might be pinning that piece is far more valuable than the piece that is unable to move. Now, relative pins, of course, are always dangerous. This is indeed a relative pin because the knight can move with check, and the rook could take on e8 if it weren't protected, and that would be awkward. But in this particular case, because it's a relative pin that's effective, we get to see white flail about just as we mentioned, right? So bishop to g5. Suggestions for black. That's all right. This is exactly what we're doing. We're comparing our moves to that of our great predecessor, Rudolf Spielmann, in The Art of the Attack. By the way, the cover piece for The Art of the Attack that I chose for this stream was what my book looked like when I went through the book cover to cover. That was the cover of the book. As I had the old Tartan series, I had a whole series of these books. These are all Tartan covers. They have a little price tag up here with the company logo. And they were absolutely a dream. I would love an entire library of Tartan books over any hardcovers and paperbacks any day. Resign, John. I do have to resign in 2 minutes, unfortunately, because I need to be on Zoom at 8 a.m. promptly, and I need to make coffee. So, did we do our candidate moves for black? Queen f5 certainly is seemingly effective, but remember you have to watch out for knight f6 check. No one, we have to sneak around the other way with the rook protected. We need that rook protected. So for example, if we play queen to f5, that knight f6 check affords black just a little bit of counterplay. Just a little bit of counterplay, unfortunately. But as it turns out, after queen h5, white does try the exact same thing. And after pawn takes, our queen is no longer hanging, which is key, right? There's no longer queen takes queen. After all, having the queen on f5 was the downfall of that suggestion. So that after rook takes, there is no more counterplay. After king f7. And that was a very efficient win in 25 moves or less. I have a study plan involving almost every book, going through the games of every chapter, illustrating the themes. If you want to speed read a chess book, I usually go through every book, seeing what games end in 20x moves or less. And for black to win, I will go through every book with every game ending in 32 moves or less, which is not so sufficient if you're studying an endgame book. It doesn't really work out that well. But the threats of mate on h2 and this diagonal are not so easily parried. So basically, if h4, then queen to f3 check. Queen to f3 check, followed by mate. So if h4, whoops, queen f3, and thank you very much. Thanks everyone for being here. We do need a raid. Yeah, queen h5. Who are we raiding? To end this stream, as I only have minutes, less than minutes, as it turns out, in this stream. We're going to go to my favorite. Jack Sarkisian? We haven't done Jack in a while. Please enjoy the Aussie Jack Sarkisian himself. There's more than one. Add you on WhatsApp. Did you send me a message? Hold on. All right, I'll see what I can do. Read the DMs. I will. Thank you, man. Meanwhile, back at the ranch. Thank you, Quadraspassky, for the subscription, for the raid. It's Arena Chan. And have a great day. Enjoy. Cheers and ciao.